in a time of disruption, doing what made you successful in the past is a path to failure.
What if the real threat to the future of work isn't AI, but it's the systems, the institutions, and the leadership habits that we all refuse to change? In this episode of Sense-Making Conversations, we go much deeper than headlines about automation or job loss. What we're talking about is what most leaders are missing, that AI isn't just transforming how we work, it's accelerating every pressure point we've all ignored. My guest today is Mark Patterson. He's the executive director of Magnet and one of Canada's foremost leaders in exclusive labor market innovation. For over a decade, Mark has worked across government, academia, and industry to bridge the growing gap between education, employment, and opportunity. It's his mission to help people reskill, adapt, and stay relevant in a world that won't wait. This episode is part truth-telling, part call to action, and it's one every leader should absolutely listen to. I'm Andrea Sampson, and this is Sense-Making Conversations. Stay with us all the way through, because what Mark shares might just shift the way you lead, learn, and show up for the future. Mark, you and I have so many conversations, and when I think about how we first met many years ago on the streets in Lisbon at a Web Summit event, I believe it was, and you were building out what is now known as Magnet. And I think in those days it hadn't even really gotten there. But the thing that I always found so fascinating about the work you do is that you're kind of always 2 to 3 steps ahead of the rest of us around what's happening in the world, and especially in the world of work. And so you've really become a futurist around the future of work. And tell me, how did that happen? Why did you step into that world?
Wow, it's a bit of an interesting story, and not one had I gone back maybe 20 years I would have necessarily thought was in my future of work. But I was brought in on a short-term contract to help Toronto Metropolitan University, Ryerson University at the time, launch their MBA program. And a long story short, got started helping students and people in the university community really thinking about transitioning. So became director of career services and worked with a lot of students both at the master's and undergraduate level, and then moved well beyond thinking about the system in Canada, how talent connects to employment and some of the challenges that we have at a systems level, the friction in the system, and got really passionate about it, Andrea. Really, when you sit with people and learn their stories and, when they're having challenges in transitioning to employment, I mean, employment means so much to our identity, to our purpose, to who we are, how we explain who we are. Like if we talk to somebody, meet somebody, we're always asking, so what do you do? So getting really personal with those stories and supporting people through transitions was really what made me passionate about saying we need to be able to figure out how to do better. And it's especially important now, I think, as we head into a period of unprecedented disruption and change.
Well, we certainly are in a in a point where, I think every day brings us one more new way of looking at the world. And I don't want to say challenge, because I truly believe that as challenging as these times are to us as humans, there's huge opportunities that are being presented. I think it's an exciting time to be alive. But, as the Buddhist saying goes, it's a blessing or a curse, may you live in interesting times. But what I know to be true is that with these times and with what's happening in our world, many of us are looking at that future of work and looking at the work we do and saying, I don't know if the thing that I do today is going to exist tomorrow. And for some people, they're right. It won't exist tomorrow. And there probably will be other things that will exist that don't exist today. In the work that you do, because you have a unique position, because of Magnet's view of the workforce, because of your own work in going globally and talking to leaders all over the world about the future of work, what's the thing that you know that the rest of us don't about that?
Well, I think it's not that people don't, but I would argue that there's some nuance to the discussion that's getting lost in the main narrative that we're all hearing right now. Like the top line discussion tends to be a question on which you'll find people on both sides. Will AI destroy jobs, more jobs than it creates, or will it create more jobs than it destroys? And you'll find people on both sides of that. And I think Andrea, I'm a tech optimist. So I do actually believe that in the long run, there will be more net new jobs created by these technologies than will be destroyed. But I don't think that's a conversation we necessarily should be focusing on right now. I think the conversation we need to be focusing on, and I think this comes mostly from my perspective of having, for the last 20 years, helped people think about how transitioning or help people run national programs and helped tens of thousands of people in their transition, and knowing that transitioning is not easy, right? So I think no matter which side of that argument you fall on, more net new jobs or more destruction of jobs, no matter what, you have to agree that there's going to be a massive amount of change, that change is happening at an unprecedented rate and speed, and that change is really difficult. So I think, in the future, when we look back in the long arc of history, you'll be able to say, yeah, more net new opportunity, more potential for abundance. Technology is really bringing abundance. And I really believe it can bring abundance. But there's a transition period that I think we should be thinking about, because anything we can do to reduce that transition friction or chaos in that transition will be net positive and will actually ensure, or be more likely to ensure, that we can actually achieve the abundance potential that technology is offering. So I get a little bit frustrated, to be honest, when everybody just, oh, no, don't worry about it. Technology always just creates more net new jobs. We've seen in the past, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, always more net new jobs. And I always bring it back. And I think, again, it's my perspective of having worked with people that are impacted by transition, and what can we do to help those? Because that's where your social unrest, the challenges that we will see will be really felt. So I care about the people and the individuals that will not be obvious when we look back in the long arc, but will be real lives and real challenges over the next period of transition.
And of course, we look at it and go, will there be more net new jobs or will there be more jobs lost? And of course, the answer to that is it's yes to both, right? That's really what you're saying. It is yes, we are going to have a lot of jobs lost. And yes, we're going to have a lot of jobs created. Is the creation rate and the loss rate at the same pace? That's a different question. And I think it's one that deserves being answered, but I don't know that we have a good answer to that yet. And, I am a student of history, and I do love looking at the past industrial revolutions, right? We do, and I don't know if you watch any of the recent shows, but there's a show on called Gilded Age. Have you
I have not,
watched it at all?
no, I have not seen that.
Well, it's what's so amazing about it is the story of the railroads, right? It is all about the Gilded Age that was started by what are termed the robber barons. And I've been listening to some of the interviews with the different actors, and they keep referring to the robber barons. And it brings me to today because I think we're in that same place. And I think that's what I heard you just say is that we are in that place of we're in the fourth industrial revolution. AI is the disruptive technology, and it is amazing and it is terrifying. And we're seeing jobs being created and we're seeing jobs being lost. But what is the role of industry in this? And what's the role of the universities? Because it is a reskilling. There is a reskilling that has to happen. And there is a role that industry, the robber barons, I'm not going to name who they are, and maybe you think they're really good and maybe you think they're horrible. It doesn't actually matter. I think in reality, there is a role for everyone to play. So as you look at that, what advice would you be giving to industry to say, look, if you can think of one thing, here's what you should do. And what advice would you be giving to the universities who are helping us, not just in putting out new people into the workforce, but what about for those of us who maybe have been around for a few moments and perhaps have skills that are no longer needed?
Yeah, well, I think the one kind of lesson I've learned over my career that I think is really important. So there's the what would I like them to do? What would I think would be good for society? And, we could talk about that. But there's also, I think, the thing that actually really drives behavior for all of us is what are we incented to do, right? And I do really think that if you look at the typical CEO in a large company, their fiduciary responsibility is to the shareholders and to maximize profit. Now, you can maximize profit a number of ways, one by cutting costs or one by increasing opportunity and so on. But often, one of the easier ways is to reduce costs. And your biggest kind of cost in almost any enterprise is currently the cost of labor, right? So it is something where I think we really need to be thinking about policymakers and so on at this point in time to really think about what kind of society we want to live in. And boards, if you're on boards for companies and others, what is the kind of company you're building, and are the incentives aligned to drive kind of where you want to be seen in the future? So I think that's really what will matter. I mean, we could talk about, and a lot of companies do talk about how including employees in the change process, having them understand the technology. But we're actually starting to see a trend in the data where CEOs are becoming more public about their layoffs and that the layoffs are being driven by AI. And by the way, it's not just AI. There's been massive investments in just new infrastructure. It takes time to do that. And so we are starting to see that we're automating more and more things, and that's a good thing. But what does it mean for people, for employees, for transition? Again, we can't expect a company, if they can automate something and their sole motivation is profit, to maintain people. But I think most of them will focus on helping in transition, and we see that happening a lot. But how do we coordinate? So that's again where my focus comes in, is to say, okay, we've got potentially faster and more disruption coming at us, and yet our systems of collaboration, coordination, reskilling, upskilling, etc., are not as evolved as they will need to be. So you asked about institutions, I think, and I work at a university, but the ways we train, how fast we're able to adapt. So we see already, for example, if you're following the data, new grad data, there's a lot of highest unemployment in a significant period of time for new grads. That's being driven by a number of factors, not just technology. It's being driven by uncertainty, tariffs, global, tariff policies and so on. So there's uncertainty in business. Uncertainty in business is causing a lack of, especially in the new grad hiring. But we're also starting to see really clear signs that it's also being driven by AI and replacing or removing, a couple of rungs out of the career ladder at the beginning. So what does that mean, and how do we adapt, and how are institutions adapting to that new reality? Are they adapting fast enough? And I would suggest to you that in systems where you have really established systems, where you have really strong systems that have served you really well historically and in the past, they're less likely to be able to adapt quickly in a period of change. And I think you see that in the data. We have recent study out from KPMG where it looked at Canadian AI literacy among 47 countries. Canada ranked, I think it was 42nd out of 47 countries. Trust in AI and technology, we ranked, I think, I'm going to have it a little bit wrong, but 23rd, 24th out of 28 countries. And what's really interesting, and I'm trying to draw to your question, is the countries that we would love to normally be in lists with and surrounded by in lists, like Sweden and Scandinavian countries, we're all lower. Countries like that are emerging economies on AI literacy and trust are higher. And I think there is a bit of a leapfrog. There's also probably some level of justifiable like caution and so on, but there's also a leapfrog moment where if you're kept out of systems, you can take advantage of new opportunities, new technologies, and leapfrog. And we see that often, but it's really interesting to see where AI is being adopted more quickly, where it's having more impact. And that's typically emerging economies right now. So that is a big question we need to be thinking about. We want ethical, responsible, appropriate adoption, but are we missing the opportunity because we're resistant to change. And I would say that we are.
What you brought to mind as you were talking, because I've been around the work world a little while, I've seen some changes. And I remember at the inception of cell phones, when we started to see early data around cell phone adoption, and it was similar, right? We started to look at what did it look like, who was adopting cell phones quickly. And it was not the established markets that were
Because they didn't
adopting
have
quickly.
landlines, right?
Well, that was it. You saw emerging markets that, of course, had no infrastructure. Putting in cell towers was way easier than, putting up wires or burying wires. And so we saw a quicker line to adoption. And so it's interesting that you're seeing a similar thing happen. Like we don't have the resistance in these emerging markets. In fact, they see it as a way to equalize to the Western markets. And of course, they're actually hopscotching us a little bit.
It's interesting. The Diversity Institute at Toronto Metropolitan University and Embryonics did a study as well. And even within Canada, it's Indigenous and racialized minorities have higher levels of AI literacy and trust or adoption. So it's even playing out there. I think there is like I said, there is an opportunity. If we look at some of the challenges of Indigenous communities being excluded even from education because of the way the system evolved, I think they're seeing opportunity. And, that's really interesting. Most people don't know, but if you grow up in a rural, remote community in Northern Ontario, Indigenous community, your children have to leave home in grade 7 to go on in school, right? So,
Wow. Wow.
there's a lot of things that are not apparent, and think about the opportunities that technology brings, even remote learning, online learning, all of the advancements that were accelerated by COVID that are also opening up and making things more accessible for those that were excluded. But systems that, were entrenched often resist that kind of change.
That's where I was just gonna go, is to say, I think the thing is, when we look at whether it's here in Canada or elsewhere in the developed world, in reality, if you are entrenched in a career that has largely been dependent upon the way in which you show up every day and think or act or behave, and suddenly this new technology, AI, is threatening that way of thinking, acting, and behaving, you're gonna resist it. And yet
Absolutely.
we've got individuals who have wanted to be a part of that industry, let's just say, and who have never had access to it because maybe the opportunity wasn't there, maybe the socioeconomic roadblocks were in their way, whatever reason. But now they have the opportunity to be there and they're going to adopt. Of course they are. They want to be on a level playing field and have wanted to be. And the person who is resisting is going to fall behind. And I think we know, I mean, look, the work that I did over the years with Singularity University, I mean, one of the things that we used to look at a lot were, what are the industries that are going to be most impacted by technology? And some of those are the industries that are all about rote memorization, understanding, looking at history. I mean, law, accounting, even medicine to some degree. And so we're seeing things that have been the mainstays of many economies. And the thing that so many people have striven towards in terms of, this is what I want to do with my life, or, the parents who are saying, my child will be this because they will be successful. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm sure who I mean when I say Clayton Christensen, the
Yes.
Harvard
Yes.
a professor that did all the work on, disruptive innovation, the innovator's dilemma,
Mhm.
etc. But there's a quote that he has that really sticks with me is he says companies fail. And I think you could replace companies with individuals, organizations, provinces,
Right.
countries will fail because they continue to do what made them successful in the past. And, in a time of disruption, doing what made you successful in the past is a path to failure, right? There's another Peter Drucker quote that I like. It's the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it's to act with yesterday's logic, right? So when the environment around you is changing, we need to rethink how we've done things, but we have systems that were so optimized and so competent and so on So whether we think of our K to 12 education or our post-secondary system, we have the best, I would argue, one of the best post-secondary education systems in the world, right? And K to 12, but in times of disruption and change, the resistance to doing new things will be a challenge. And yes, we absolutely have to make sure we're doing it in an ethical, responsible way that's aligned with our values, but just completely throwing up roadblocks. But why do we do it, Andrea? We do it because, especially in our jobs, it's so tied in with our own self-worth, our identity, our purpose, and everything. And when something threatens that, it's like literally physically threatening the individual, right? And so that kind of immune response or resistance, whatever we want to call it, will be high, and it will create challenges. There was a David Coletto, who's a pollster based in Ottawa. He's a company called Abacus Data, but it was in July, so it's really recent, just did a survey of Canadians, and, 50, I think it was 55% of people 18 to 29 are highly concerned around, that AI is going to disrupt even their perception of what their career is going to be, and they're concerned. And he even came out recently, and I think this goes to another question. It'd be interesting, like what happens, like he's actually already seen in the data where he argues that there's a potential kind of cleaving of even the political landscape in Canada, where you could have room for an anti-AI, anti-technology party, or a platform of one of the existing parties that's focused on that, and that will gain traction as we have more and more disruption. This is why I feel that it's so important that we figure out how to show people that vision, positive vision of the future, how we help them chart that course, see themselves in it. Because if not, it becomes harder and harder to achieve that abundant state which the technology could provide. Technology is a tool. It really comes down to how we choose to use it and how we create our society that we want to live in around it. And that means making sure, you talked about the robber barons, and there was a reason there was such a massive concentration of wealth in such a few individuals at that time. And, one could argue that led to certain events early, in the 1900s. And I think, we need to pay attention to that. There is a risk now of like massive concentration of power and wealth in the hands of a few individuals. And if everybody doesn't see, and we've seen this over and over across all history, if everybody doesn't see the benefit to them, to their lives, to the lives of their families, you'll have backlash. So that's why I feel so important. I'm a technology optimist. I think there are amazing things. Like, look at all of the potential benefits that AI can bring in healthcare, et cetera, in solving some of our greatest challenges. It will create new challenges, to be
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
But, if we don't allow all people in society to see themselves in having some kind of benefit from it, then we're definitely not on a good path.
Yeah. And, I want to go back to a couple of things that you said. One of the things you talked about earlier was that, look, we achieve what we incent, right? In reality, if you want a job done, make sure that you've aligned your incentives to the job that you actually want to get done and not to other things. And so when we think about that, like incenting adoption of AI and adoption of AI in such a way that it actually is in building our companies, do you see anyone out there who's starting to do that? Is there any work being done on this where we're using an incentive system to bring AI into the business in such a way that it's helping with displacement?
Yeah, so I think what's really exciting, so there's a couple of things here. So I think that the technology that is bringing the disruption needs to be used as part of the solution,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So first of all, like there's so many exciting things that we're looking at on the technology side that super, super exciting, like transformational as far as, for example, even how we could do reskilling and upskilling and learning. So really the work we do at Magna, we're really focused on identifying those technologies, having them accelerated, testing and evaluating to make sure that there's evidence of their impact. I'll give you one example, just even in the reskilling, upskilling side, the ability for learning agents that are emerging now to provide absolutely individually customized learning experiences is really incredible. Again, very different than how we do learning now, but you could constrain the tools to verify, validate information. That's, for example, it could be in health, or it could be in project management, it could be in starting a business as an entrepreneur. But then the large language models can customize that to your context and work with you at your cognitive level. So your level of numeracy, literacy, all of those different factors, and teach in an individualized fashion as your mentor, basically almost in the flow of work, could help you reskill, upskill, and have the knowledge that you need to pursue your interests and passions. So super, super exciting. On the matching side, like there's tools that we have now that drastically change how we could connect people to opportunities. So when you put those things together, the tools are emerging at the same time that we're being challenged by some of the technology causing the disruption. The technology is also bringing with it some of the solutions that could help us transition. But again, our openness to testing and evaluating those solutions, understanding the challenges that they may also bring, and investigating that is and should be our priority right now to be able to deal with the disruption. At the big macro level, Andrea, like I think we both have a little Singularity University DNA. So you more than me, but certainly I was influenced by it in a lot of my thinking. But there's Peter Diamandis has a podcast called Moonshots, and Imad Mustaq, who is the founder of Stability AI, there was a podcast on, really, really deeply thinking about how, if we are actually potentially changing one of the core kind of factors of our means of production, right? Like, so if you think about the four kind of factors that are commonly thought of, it's land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship.
Yep.
At the core. And labor, we've been automating for many, many years. That's not new. Even early tool creation was a form of automation. But we're really, at the current time, we're really moving where, with agentic processes and agentic tools, being able to sense, reason, and act like full end-to-end, we're potentially replacing, certainly drastically evolving that labor input in some areas. And so what does that mean? Like when a core factor of production starts to be changed and replaced by compute. Imad Mustaq has written a paper on how, if these changes play out, how you could have blockchain and AI solutions and build a new system that actually is aligned with incentives for good, right? So there are some people thinking really, really deeply about this, but when you actually just take the last few sentences I mentioned, that's like a whole kind of reframing of our whole economic system. Not an easy task, and certainly major disruption, but people are thinking about it. And I think the technology, if we're willing to look, brings the solutions with it to deal with the disruption that it's causing.
I agree with you. The solution is in the problem always, right? I mean, I think that's one of the things that we learn as we become, sort of better problem solvers is to first of all, to look to the problem. But the challenge, of course, right now, this is a complex problem and it's creating a complex set of follow-on effects. I'm going to come back to the very beginning of our conversation talking about this displacement of the workforce. So we've got the creation of jobs. We've got the, sort of the disproportionate creation and loss, right? One is happening and the other is happening, but they're not happening at the same time. We will have people affected. And as you've said, yes, there are ways in which to reskill, and our institutions need to be looking at that. Our organizations need to start incentivizing their existing staff to reskill, because that existing staff may not be staff in the not so distant future. And so start thinking about it now. But we are going to have a time where there will be a lot of displaced people. And we are starting to see that. I mean, I know I was listening to a podcast recently. I think it was the Knowledge Project. great podcast.
Shane Parrish. Yeah.
They were talking about Shopify and a memo that Toby had sent around looking at AI and saying, look, if you are thinking about hiring, I want you to first look at the AI tools that are out there and see if you really need that hire. If you need the hire, go ahead and do it, but look to AI first. And it caused a lot of uproar because right away there was, a lot of backlash that said, wait a minute, AI is taking my job. But I mean, examined closer, look, that was the right thing to do in many ways. As a CEO, the tools that are out there are fantastic. It's not about discriminating against the human. It's about what's the best tool for the job, and not to call humans tools because we are more than that. But sometimes we have a job to do. But as you think about that and look at this displacement and look at this in between time, how do we create a world, I guess, or a community or an environment that is helping to support? And what are the things that people should be doing today, knowing that to some degree this is an inevitability? It's not a bad thing. It's just part of a transition.
Again, to be clear, I think it can be a bad thing at an individual level
Of course.
if you're not positioned properly. And so that's where I think and talk a lot about people taking agency to understand how things are evolving. It's why we talk a lot about just even basic AI literacy and understanding how your career, your area of expertise, et cetera, is evolving and how you can appropriately use the tools to augment yourself. Like that's a personal area of responsibility right now that you owe to yourself and to your family and to those that depend on you. It's important. A lot of people, unfortunately, we see are sticking their head in the sand, and that's not a good that's not a good choice. So I think thinking about that and really, like I said, taking the responsibility. Now it's hard. Many people have been saying for years, it's more and more important because your jobs are going to change many times. Lifelong learning is important, but now it really is coming very clearly to kind of a crunch period where you need to remain and stay relevant. So this is the other thing that we saw in a lot of the research recently is companies are not investing enough in AI literacy, reskilling and upskilling. And we're starting to see some movement in that area, but I think it's really important. And AI reskilling, upskilling, it's not just about the technology, but what are the mindsets
Yeah.
that we individually need? Like, how do we develop a growth mindset to see opportunity, pursue opportunity? How do we manage our careers in periods of more disruption? How can we remain open to seeing opportunity in our future? How do governments establish, working together with the private sector, establish policies to help transition and support evidence-based reskilling and upskilling initiatives? So groups like the Future Skills Center and, the government meet regularly with senior bureaucrats. And I can tell you that the teams at the Government of Canada are thinking a lot about this. The Future Skills Center is thinking a lot about this, but what's the right kind of social policy to support that? But it's a big challenge. And I would say everybody, back to my first point, everybody has a need and responsibility. We talked already about, companies and boards and so on need to align incentives, because I think it's going to be really important. I think my personal opinion is that everything we do is important, but there still will be a period of significant disruption. I can't see us not having to go through that. Just an example why I use it a lot, but if you've ever cleaned your garage or your closet and you had a vision of what that closet or garage could look like in the future and it excites you, it still is a bit of a challenge to get there. You usually have to pull everything out into the front yard. You have to think about putting shelving in or reorganizing, and then how you put everything back in, and what maybe you recycle and upcycle and transition and so on. And, but it always is a period of, with massive change, there's always a period of reorganization. If you stop in the middle of it, it's not good. You need to make a commitment to go all the way through and reorganize. And I think we need a shared vision as a country of what that future is, how the technology can help us get there. And we all need to kind of work towards it. And we need to support those that may, and figure out in a society, support those that might not be as ready for the transition and so on. How do we do that and build a society that we all would like to live in and work in? But there is a real important factor of individual responsibility as well. So, I mean, that's where I feel I'm trying to have my voice, to do what I can in the space, in the spheres of influence that I have. And I think it's a collective duty for all of us. We all need to pay attention to what's happening. I maybe end this on just saying that I think that's the other thing is people really do not understand the rate of change, how fast things are changing.
As exactly where I was just gonna go is to say, I think as I look at the changes that we've had throughout history with different industrial revolutions, and the time for that change, of course, was much longer. The rate of change was slower. But I think that rate of change is both a challenge, but also an opportunity. Because one of the things that we're learning right now, as we all become more comfortable with AI, is that it creates new opportunities for us that we didn't even know we could take, we could address. And so as we become more fluent with AI, as AI grows in its own ability to serve and to act as a teammate beside us or as a thought partner in how we show up and do the work that we do, what new opportunities could we each create? Now, some of us are in careers that are maybe decades old. Well, how could that career look differently using AI as a thought partner? For some people, maybe you're new in your career. Well, how can you grow more quickly with AI as a teammate? If we start looking at AI and these large language models in new ways, that gap between the jobs lost and jobs created, I think to some degree we have the opportunity to control that. Now, not saying there isn't still going to be some sort of a deficit, because I think it's challenging. We're in a transition period. And I think if I were to have a crystal ball, I think it's the entrepreneurs that are going to solve this problem. Because I think that it is, as we see displacement, we're going to see a growth of entrepreneurs. And that growth of entrepreneurs is going to start using AI in ways that many of us never even considered. And as a result, it'll change the way things happen. But you hit it on the head, which is it has to start with mindset, because mindset is the thing that terrifies us and keeps us from taking that step forward. I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think for, when I'm talking to people or, I speak to a lot of students, new grads, and also a lot of frontline workers that support people in transition. And I think the two things that to me that are going to be critically important is a growth mindset and also an entrepreneurial mindset. So
Yeah.
100% agree with you. Like those two combined are going to be critical, and there will be new jobs and opportunities that we can't even dream of right now that will be probably mainstream jobs in a few years, which is crazy to think about. But that doesn't discount the fact that some people will fall outside of that. Like not everybody can be or will easily adopt an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah. Well, some people just they're not capable of it because of the way in which their career has been. And nothing against anyone. It's not that one mindset is better than another, but I think having a growth mindset is the piece that's so important.
Even in your role, like again, but it comes down again, that personal responsibility piece, staying abreast of what's happening, keeping an open mind. I had a student come up to me at an event I was speaking at. He came up to me after the session and he said, I recently graduated. He said, I feel like I'm running up the stairs and I'm running as fast as I can up the stairs, but the stairs are falling out behind me. Like that is the sense that a lot of people have right now. And it's real and there's reason for it. And my advice to him was again, like exactly this. So he was using an analogy of the stairs. I said, well, don't look backwards because you'll trip, right? Like you have to keep looking forward. You have to focus on the opportunity. And to a certain degree, there is a little bit of this run faster or smarter kind of thing. But it's a daunting notion. Like the idea that we have to become a novice over and over and over again and put ourselves out there over and over again to pursue the opportunity is daunting. right? Like mostly we have a mindset, at least, my age and so on, like you have a mindset, you went to school for 4 years, you graduated, you get a job, and hopefully you have a pension or some other form of security, or maybe you're an entrepreneur too. It's going to be a very different future. And I think that is daunting, but that's the thing I think we need to build a culture of and get people around and create the policy and supports to enable that. Because even today I'm looking at, like, there's a whole community, and I follow it on, online, a whole community of people that are just exploding with ideas and opportunities that
Yeah.
this technology is bringing, that are creating all kinds of businesses and all kinds of opportunity. But if you're not paying attention, you won't see that part of it,
Totally.
right?
And I wanna come back to that student who's running on the stairs. Yes, having the growth mindset, keep your eyes focused ahead, absolutely. And the one more thing I would add to it, and I think it speaks to the rest of your answer there, is you're not alone. Because I think it's really easy in these times of change to forget that we are a community that supports each other. And I think, for me, it's the one thing that I would put out there to, everybody who's listening. Who can you reach back and grab a hand and help them? Who around you could help you come forward a little bit? We're all struggling to some degree because it is challenging to every one of us. There is no one out there who is a natural at AI because it is a new technology.
You know what? It's so funny because we've kind of just gone through the arc of my presentations without intentionally. But after I talk about mindsets, the main focus is collaboration and supporting each other. I mean, I think in this time, and you see it, in times of challenge, even, is the threat of tariffs, etc. You saw the reaction, people galvanize, they come together, they support, and I think we will absolutely see and benefit from that. And I would throw out the same call to everybody listening, like reach back, help, support, and get involved. And no matter what age, this is what's so cool about some of the generative AI tools and so on, is it's made technology so accessible. One of the big
Yes.
trends that's going to happen is the technology, the interfaces, the complicated technology interfaces and everything are going to disappear. And, like you could be 90 years old now and talking to generative AI and having a great conversation about something you're interested in or learning about something. You may think there's somebody on the other end of the line, which is funny because I've seen that. The reality is it's so accessible. You can speak to a generative AI model and it'll create an image or a tool. Like the accessibility, it makes everybody a graphic designer. Now, graphic designers might feel threatened, but if you're a great graphic designer, you're still going to be in a different league.
Well, that's just it. You're gonna use the technology better.
Yeah.
What I will end on is to say, we are not alone. We do need to help each other. And I'm going to go out to the modern day robber barons and say, that's for you too. Reach back, give us a hand, give all of us a hand. There's a lot of companies out there that are holding a lot of wealth, that are holding a lot of power. And in reality, it's all of our jobs. It's not just the jobs of the people affected, but it's the jobs of those large organizations to invest in helping this deficit and make sure that it is actionable, because it doesn't take a lot when you've got so much. So
Well, at the end of the day, you need a strong middle class and an affluent society for them to get into the positions that they're even contemplating getting into. So, you need customers. So how does that new economy, I'll even go as far as saying, but that new balance occur, and how do we create that society? We all have to have a voice in that, and everybody should be thinking about it because it is really profound. And I guess, like, just end on, like, if you aren't paying attention, start paying attention.
yeah. And if you aren't using AI, pick it up and start playing with it. It is probably going to be one of the most profound things you do.
The David Sachs, who's the senior policy person in the Trump administration in the US, tweeted a few months ago saying that within the periods, or within the next 4 years, within the Trump term, AI will be a million times more powerful just because of the build out. And so it is changing super rapidly. it will affect all aspects of our life. It's not just the chatbot that people are interacting with now. And yeah, we all need to be paying attention.
Mark, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I always love talking to you. It was almost like nobody else is going to hear this. We're
I
just
know.
having a chat.
I know. We have great conversations, but I'm glad this one actually got recorded because I think we hit on a few things. So, how can our listeners keep in touch with you and the work that you're doing? Because you are doing some incredibly important work in the world, and people should be following that. So, how can they keep in touch?
LinkedIn is probably my main channel that I would be on social platforms, but you can also find us on network.ca. So again, we're a center of innovation focused on the future work. We're housed at Toronto Metropolitan University, so you can reach out to me through there. I am visible online, so you can find me.
I know, Mark, you speak all over the world on the future of work. So if you've seen Mark's name in going to be speaking somewhere, I would suggest go and watch him because he will dive deep into some of these and give you new insight that you didn't know you needed. So thank you. I so appreciate your time today. And I'm looking forward to seeing how both of us are able to take some of this and action it forward because we've got lots of people I know that we're each helping to bring them forward. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. You too.
My conversation with Mark helped me to realize why the future of work feels daunting. It's because AI is moving faster than our readiness to respond, and it's changing the actual work we do and revealing all the places where we're getting stuck. Through Mark's lens, we learned 3 things today. First, that transition is not neutral. In times of transition, we feel disrupted, and that creates winners and losers. And if we're not actively building pathways for reskilling and support, we're not leading, we're just reacting. Second, that our institutions, education, training, and even industry are struggling to keep pace. They've been optimized for stability, not responsiveness. And unless we rethink the systems themselves, we'll keep preparing people for jobs that just no longer exist. This is not sustainable, and it certainly isn't smart. And third, that designing for those most at risk of being left behind actually strengthens the system for everyone. When we build with the needs of those most vulnerable in mind, we're able to surface the gaps that affect all of us. Friction in access, lack of flexibility, and outdated models of success. The reality is, inclusive systems are simply more dynamic, more human, and more likely to succeed in a world where the only constant is change. And we have all gotten used to that world over the past 5 years or more. This episode reminded us that AI, yes, it's a spark, but it's our response that turns it into a fire. Because the opportunity in front of us isn't to survive disruption. Rather, it's to shape what comes next, to shape it through clarity, to have the courage to move forward and to take care of all of those who need to be in the system along with each of us. And I think that is the most important conversation that we can be having right now about the future of work and how AI is impacting it. If this conversation gave you something to think about or made you feel more prepared for the change ahead, why not go ahead and share it? And subscribe for more episodes that challenge your perspective and help you lead with intention. I'm Andrea Sampson, and this has been Sense Making Conversations. I can't wait to see you in our next one.